Oh, what an unbelievable time to be a college women's volleyball fan. We have entered the final month of the regular season. It's November. It's 6 rotations. He's Mick. I'm Daniel, and we are going to jump right into the juice. As always, brought to you by SNA Sports. Better equipment for a better game. Mick, number one falls again. We've got a great show for you. The committee came out with another top 10. The RPI is updated. Again, the AVCA shakes up who they have as their coaches poll voted number one. And we're going to talk to Oregon stud freshman Mimi Colyer ahead of a big weekend at home against Washington and Washington State. The Pac-12 had themselves a riptide of a weekend. The West Coast Conference fallen off just a bit as Pepperdine lost to San Francisco, and San Diego may be paying for it. Mick, what is the biggest storyline from this weekend in your mind?
Well, I thought the AVCA voting said a lot about what's going on. There were actually 5 teams that got votes as number one in the country. Now, at this time of the year, can you ever remember more than 2 teams being in the hunt for number one? And we had five teams that got at least one vote. San Diego had 4, Wisconsin had 4, believe that or not, and then 54 for Texas. I think Texas is number one. I think the coaches got that right. But boy, between the RPI, the committee's top 10, and the coaches poll, holy cow, we have got something to work out here.
We do. We have a lot of content. It's almost enough that we need to do 2 episodes per week moving forward. Let's take a look at this AVCA top 10 now. We're going to compare it with the NCAA Volleyball Committee's top 10. And as you see it, a new number one as Texas. They smashed Texas Tech midweek. They beat Kansas State in 4 in Manhattan over the weekend. Coach Jarrett Elliott picked up his 600th win. And so you see it. You mentioned the 54 first place votes. I'll tell you what, the coaches put to the test this weekend. They couldn't really sit in the back seat and kind of float by like they might have the last few weeks, especially under the tight guise of the committee's top 10. But take a look at the Louisville-Pittsburgh setup. Louisville's 5. They had a great weekend. And how about this, Mick? So nice to see 9,000 fans, 9,000 loyal Louisvillians packed into the KFC Yum Center as the Cardinals just destroyed Notre Dame over the weekend. Minnesota sits at 9. There was a lot of interesting movement in the Big Ten this weekend. Ohio State had the big weekend where they swept Michigan on Wednesday. That was a tight one on ESPNU. And then the crazy 15-all 5th set rally to beat Penn State. Penn State falls out of the top 10. They're without their star middle in Taylor Trammell for the rest of the year as well. Ohio State, though, stays pat at 6. Pittsburgh 7. Stanford wins their 10th straight. They beat Washington State on the road. That's a tough place to play. The first home loss for the Cougars this season. And then Stanford, a tight 5-set win over Washington. All right, we're going to pull up the committee's top 10, Mick, and I want you to go absolutely ham. This is going to be the Mick Shines section. It's Texas 1, Louisville 2, Nebraska 3, and we've waited this long. I want you to go ahead and take center stage because Nebraska swept at Wisconsin on Wednesday night, and yet Wisconsin at 7 in this top 10.
You know, it pays to go back and look at the schedules of all of these teams, because there are some teams that I think they've got this right on. I think the committee have got 9 of the teams right. They have 9 teams that I think have a chance that could squeak in there and win the championship. But the 10th one they missed big time on. And as I look at the numbers, I think they must have just gone down the RPI and took the first big school in Power 5, because the wins and losses of these teams don't really justify some of the placement. And it's really interesting to go back and look who really played the talent and who really won. And I've been watching the conferences, and let me throw this into you as we look at this, because I don't understand how the SEC is in a position to get 8 teams possibly in the tournament, and yet not one team in the top 10 of the committee's projection. And if you look at the schedules, they're right. There's none of the SEC teams have wins significantly enough to move them into that area. Now, you know Florida and that area. You've been to school down there and that sort of thing, and they have a lot of pride in their program, but they have not beaten but one team this year, and that doesn't justify them being up there. And Oregon's the same way. They have only beaten Stanford. They beat Rice, but they've only beaten Stanford, and this weekend they get a chance to take on Washington now. But to have them 10, I don't know how we can justify that. I think the coaches are pretty close, only they really respect San Diego, and San Diego went out and played the competition. What's happened, though, with Louisville not being number 2 is they lost when DeBeer is injured. San Diego's had no injuries significant that we can tell. They did not play with Edwards, the left side, against Ohio State and lost. And that was significant, I think. But injuries are going to make a difference. So I think Louisville's still in the top 4, honestly, with DeBeer. If she's healthy and she's playing 100%, Louisville's a tough out there. Nebraska showed some weakness, right? They got swept on the road. And here's the deal about Wisconsin. I looked at Wisconsin. I'm trying to figure these guys out. It looks like they play well comfortably, meaning they play well when they know the teams they're playing, like Big Ten teams. Who have they lost to this year? Well, they've lost to teams outside of the conference. They lost to Florida. Florida's one big win. Well, came there. They lost to Pitt, another team that they don't really pay attention to because it's not in that Big Ten mode. And then they've had one loss in the Big Ten to Minnesota, but they corrected that. So I think Wisconsin is higher than maybe they're placed right now. The coaches think they're third. I don't know. Where do you think they are?
You know what, with Wisconsin, and so, you look at the discrepancies, right? San Diego 2 in the coaches poll. That's their highest ranking, tied for 2013. The last time the Toreros got that high, they were 5 in the committee. I kind of like making Wisconsin go to the road, right? I kind of like having them earn it in a way where they're a top 10, but no, they're not a top 4. At the same time, though, they're going to have another chance. They're going to have an earning spot at the end of the season. They're going to play against Ohio State, Nebraska to end the season at the end of November. So Wisconsin will have that chance to get into the top 4 because all they have to do is just win out. And they're going to win the conference and they're going to get in the top 4 if that happens. Nebraska, Ohio State in the same spot. So I don't need to worry as much about those teams. Now it's the Florida, Oregon, Georgia Tech conversations that kind of get things a little bit more muddled. I want to show you the rest of the AVCA top 25 here so you can see the biggest discrepancy, and that's Oregon 16 compared to the 10 spot that the committee has them, which is very interesting. Who is that team that you mentioned deserves it more than Oregon? Is it Georgia Tech? Is it Florida? Is it Baylor? Who do you think should be in that 10 spot?
Well, and I haven't examined Purdue yet, but they had a freshman, what I call a freshman lull, where the freshmen were grinding. They were really good. And then all at once they checked out about midterm time.
Well, they're not a top 10. They lost to Northwestern on Friday at home. They're not a top 10 team.
Northwestern's going to get in the tournament.
They deserve it.
That's not a bad loss anymore to lose to Northwestern. They're going to be in the tournament.
Sure. But it's not a top 10 loss. It's not a team that a top 10 team loses to. They lost the first set horribly to Indiana on Sunday. They came back to win in 4. Purdue sitting right now at 14th in the coaches poll. There's a couple other names down at the bottom that just kind of middle around, right? Houston had the big week last week, and I didn't give enough credit to them. It was their first poll ranking since 1994, and they sit again at number 23. Western Kentucky, 22. They've got 54 straight conference wins, 53, something like that. They'll play Rice in 10 or so days on November 10th. That's going to be a great game. Another huge note, as you look here at what comes down to respect in the conference, Pittsburgh is the only Power 5 team that hasn't lost a conference match in the entire 5 conferences that we know and put as the Power 5. Where is Pittsburgh? Why aren't they higher in the coaches poll? I like Pittsburgh as number 4 in the AVC committee. It throws that in. I would have rathered the committee given San Diego over Nebraska just for the time being because Nebraska just got embarrassed on the road. for the 9th straight time they've lost to Wisconsin. That's one of those things that you don't really reward a team for losing like that. But like we said, Nebraska will have their chance. Go ahead.
Talk about Pittsburgh, because they only have one significant loss, and that's to USD. When they lost to USD, they were playing without their starting setter.
Right.
And that was in a tournament at A&M in the first week of the season or so.
Alexis.
They've had wins over BYU, Ohio State, Georgia Tech, and Louisville. And that's without DeBeer. So that's why I say wait till DeBeer's healthy. See how Pittsburgh comes out the second time with Louisville. And mentioning the 9,000 people at Louisville, I wanted to sneak this in, Daniel. Danny Busboom Kelly had early in the year said to everybody in Louisville, we need to get out of this smaller facility. We need to play in the Yum Center.
They should do the tournament there.
Yeah, the athletic director was quoted as saying, well, everybody wants something now, and there's not enough money for that. She showed you just last week what she can draw at the Yum Center, 9,000 people. That Louisville program needs to be in the Yum Center. The competition is good. The only thing that's hurting them is only 4 teams, in my projection, are going to get out of the ACC into that tournament. And that's where she's kind of stuck with a bunch of teams that for some reason aren't RPI going to be eligible, where the SEC has 8 teams. Think about this.
Crazy.
The SEC has 8 teams that are going to be eligible for this tournament unless something changes. And I don't see the committee changing.
No, it's interesting because then you take a look at like the Big Ten and the way that the fans flock to the Big Ten, because ESPN made all of that noise about how many thousands and thousands of people watched their Texas match and their ESPN 1 and 2 matches, and they were like 200, 250, 300,000. Well, 362,000 people on average watch this Wisconsin-Nebraska sweep. Imagine if it went 5. How many more people? It was the second most watched match in BTN history between last year's matchup of the same teams that averaged 375,000. So it's interesting to see. And I had a lot of fun. I was in Chicago last week. I got to watch it from the Big Ten Network studios. So I want to give a huge shout out to them for welcoming me. I did a cool segment previewing the match with Emily Eamon, and we're going to have her on here in the next week or so to talk about RPI versus committee versus coaches. And I don't even think we're going to have that much time to talk about RPI today, because of course we've got Mimi Colyer coming on in a minute with Oregon. But when you look at it, you throw Illinois into the bunch. They beat Penn State on Wednesday night. Penn State, of course, is now without Trammell in the middle. That's big. But Illinois is going to sneak their way into the bubble conversation with Northwestern. And then you have the debate. Does a team like Mississippi State, Arkansas, LSU, are they more in the conversation than Illinois and
those guys are all in, but
Crazy.
Illinois is not getting in. Daniel.
I know.
They're not getting in. And here's one for you. You mentioned RPI versus the rankings. So let's look at Creighton and Marquette. Who's better? The coaches think Creighton's better. They got them at 13, Marquette at 17. But the RPI says Marquette's better. Yep. They're at 12 and Creighton's at 15. So, both of those teams are right in the middle of the hunt. Maybe they should have been 10th place by the coach.
I agree. And that's one of those things as well. At the end of the season, they're going to play again, and they're going to play in the Big East Championship, and the committee knows that. And something about that, and same thing with Wisconsin, the committee knows they're going to play Ohio State and Nebraska again at the end of the year, so they can play their way in. That's why I'd like to give a little bit more love to San Diego, because they're not going to play their way into anything. They have to just cross their fingers and hope that everybody chokes so that they can host the regionals. It's true. It's unfortunate.
Well, or who can get better? That's what I'm looking at. Who can get better? There are only 3 or 4 teams that I see that can get better. I don't see San Diego getting better. I see them staying good. I see Ohio State staying good, but I don't see them getting better. There are some teams that can get better. I wonder if Wisconsin can play out of the friendly. Basically play.
They didn't have Guccigan, the star libero, against Minnesota, and they still beat them in 4. Yeah, that was impressive. I thought that was a very impressive win without Gigi.
I thought that was a strange match, quite honestly. I watched that whole match, and I watched the coaches. I watched everything. Just very, very strange. So I think Minnesota's playing for the end, not the season. I think they're trying to get better.
Okay, let's talk a little RPI though here, because this
Okay.
weekend is not the sexiest of matchups. There's not a ton of ranked versus ranked. So we're going to have the same similar kind of conversation next week, Mick, barring some big upsets. But where is Ohio State in this top 4 conversation? Because the Buckeyes, who, by the way, just went undefeated in the month of October for the first time since I was born in 1994. That is awesome for Coach J. Foe and company. They're 3 in the RPI. Stanford is 4 behind Texas and Louisville. That's a top 4 right there that I would not argue with, right? If you saw Texas, Louisville, Ohio State, Stanford right now, who's going to argue with those? Because those are the 4 of the hottest teams in the nation when healthy.
Yeah, I think that's right. On the other side of it, I just like Ohio State not in that top 4 because I just don't see them getting better, but I see them being in the picture all the way. I like them in the second 4. I like them in the top 8. I think the coaches are seeing that a little bit better. I think San Diego can play, but I don't think they're going to get a top 4. I think Louisville is. I think, like I said, I haven't heard the status of DeBeer, but she makes a big difference. That kid can play, and they need her out there for points. So it's pretty interesting. And will the Big Ten destroy each other? That's what's coming down. Not help each other, but destroy each other.
Well, this weekend's a good one. Ohio State Friday night in Evanston to take on Northwestern on BTN Plus. Washington at Oregon on Friday as well. And then Sunday, just to give you a little bit of a look ahead, I'll have my AVCA matches to watch on social media on Friday as well. But Nebraska at Northwestern, Purdue at Michigan, Washington State getting some votes now. They're at Oregon. Like I said, it's not the craziest of weekends. Georgia Tech at Florida State as well, and Minnesota at Illinois on Sunday. Not much on Saturday. But here's the meat of the RPI debate. We can kind of wrap things up here. Florida's 8, Kentucky's 10, San Diego's 9, and that Florida and Kentucky RPI is just hoisting up the rest of the SEC, because when you look at it, and of course, you've got no SEC team other than them 2 in the top 20. Arkansas, who took Florida to 5 on Sunday, they're 22. LSU's 28. Mississippi State's 33. I don't know. I don't see Mississippi State and Georgia. Georgia's 38. I'm not sure if all those teams are going to make it, like you're teasing, to be honest.
Well, I'm just going by the way the committee has picked using the RPI, and they're all in. But what I wanted to point out is I'm not going to show love for Kentucky, and I'll tell you why. Their schedule has been great, but they've lost to Marquette, they've lost to Wisconsin, they've lost to Louisville, they've lost to Nebraska, they've lost to LSU, and they've lost to A&M. They corrected some of those with wins, but those are all their losses. They only have 1 win, and that's against Creighton. I don't think they've proved that they're a top 10, top 15 team. I think they've proved they can schedule a lot of people, but until they beat some people, I don't think we give Kentucky that much love.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where they're just hanging. They had a good enough non-conference section, and then the final of this season will really decide where they sit. But then I want to talk one more thing here, and that's the West Coast Conference. Pepperdine loses to the Dons. We saw Pacific Gonzaga come up with big wins against BYU and Pepperdine. Pepperdine's 44th. They're not making it unless they beat San Diego at the end.
I think it's a 2-team conference. I agree with you.
I'm going to throw out a rant. I don't even know if BYU is deserving of the NCAA tournament this season.
Well, we're going to see, because they're pushing.
They need to beat San Diego.
Yeah, they need to beat everybody from here on out to prove that they can play. They came out the season BYU, and they haven't been BYU as we know them as they've gone along. So that's another team we have to see if they get better.
And then last 2 tidbits, Iowa State grabs the 25th spot. They beat Texas 2 weeks ago, finally getting the coaches' recognition as USC fell to Colorado. They drop out of the top 25. Cyclones, Christy Johnson-Lynch, protege to John Cook and Terry Pettit, and, of course, the standout setter for the champion team. Watch out for them. The Cyclones are really dangerous. Maya Duckworth on the outside. I really like her. Their first time in the polls in 5 years. And then lastly here, what will be interesting is the Big West, because Hawaii now has their clear path to win the Big West. They beat a weird Davis team in 5, but Cal Poly's fallen off. Santa Barbara's kind of dropped out a little bit. So this weekend will kind of decide the Big West. Couple more big weekends that I want to give some love to before we wrap this up. And I got a great text from Ed Strong, who runs the NCAA Volleyball Scores Twitter. So Tuesday night, which already happened, Northern Kentucky, Wright State will be a great one. Yale and Princeton play this weekend for the Ivy League lead. UTRGV against UVU for the WAC lead. Colorado State at San Jose State. The Rams are on the bubble, so if Colorado State keeps winning and doesn't win the conference, that could be an interesting one. And then your Sun Belt Conference.
I think, yeah.
Yep, Troy and Texas State for the West lead in the Sun Belt Conference. So I wanted to give some love to some of the non-Power 5 teams that have huge weekends coming up this week. Mick and I are going to chat with you again next week. We are going to have a little bit more of a break it down head to head. We'll have a week to breathe with the committee's poll, and next week will be a lot of fun. We won't have a player next week. We'll be focused on the NCAA tournament from here on out pretty much. But coming up now, Mimi Colyer, cannot wait to get to this interview. Mick's been wanting to chat to this Oregon superstar pin hitter for a while, so enjoy it coming up now. So happy to be joined now by the Oregon freshman Mimi Colyer, joining us from Eugene. Big weekend coming up in Eugene, Mimi. Thanks so much for joining us. What has this, I guess, finish to the season kind of been like with the polls coming up and everything like that? What's the conversation, at least between some of the underclassmen in the team?
Yeah, I think that we're all just making sure that we are playing Oregon volleyball through and through, doing everything on our side of the net that we can, to get us where we want to be at the end of the season.
And one question that we've tried to ask everyone, and we've gotten good answers, especially from Logan Eggleston, about getting groomed in the volleyball world, and depending on what age that started. So what was volleyball like for you? Did you have the parents that knew everything about the club team and everything like that? Or did you play a couple different sports and kind of found volleyball late?
Yeah, so I played soccer until I was like 8, or until I was like 11. And then in 6th grade, I switched over to volleyball because my mom played at Long Beach. And she was like, I think you'll like it. She never forced me, but she was like, you can try it. And she was actually my first coach at like a little community thing from where I am. And I fell in love with it. And I was like, this is awesome. So I played volleyball and basketball throughout middle school. And then in high school, I just played volleyball and focused on that. But yeah, no, my mom was always super, like, didn't want to push me, like, didn't want to kind of overstep. Like, she let me just kind of do my own thing. It was just always super supportive. Like my dad too, obviously, because he played water polo at Long Beach. So both very athletic parents. So yeah.
Love that. And, from California as well. And I'm sure a lot of volleyball fans watching can relate to that. And how weird or cool was it that your first collegiate match was against the alma mater of both of your parents? Yeah. And obviously, I remember following it. It wasn't even available to be watched online. So we're like following the scores, crazy 5th set. Walk me through and kind of maybe give a little bit of advice for that first match, and maybe what would you have changed if you could have in terms of pregame and nerves or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think playing against Long Beach, I think that was a super like cool full circle moment. And I don't know, I think the nerves are going to be natural. I think again, my first collegiate, like I'm going to be nervous no matter what. But I think definitely like just leaning into my teammates and making sure like we all are here for you. Everyone's here for you. Like we're all super supportive of each other. And just allowing them to help me whenever I need it.
Okay. And then walking me through a 5th set in the eyes of a first year player for college, but also like the first weekend of your college career. What was that like? Did it go quickly or did it move slowly?
I think I remember it being a really quick set. I remember I was I thought we were playing pretty decently. Obviously, I think we've gotten a lot better since then, and we've meshed really well as a team since then. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was a very kind of hectic 5th set, but I think we pulled it out, thankfully. And, we've only gone up since then.
Go ahead, Mick.
Well, a couple of things. You remind me so much of Logan Tom. Do you know that name at all?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what,
thank you.
Your eyes, the way you talk, everything is Logan. I recruited Logan right out of high school, took her on the national team with us all over the world. And course, you know her history of how good she got, but
Yeah.
boy, you are absolutely Logan too.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
And maybe on the court also, the way you're playing. I really enjoyed watching you play. But let me ask you a really hard question, something that maybe is something that will resonate with young kids watching this, because you played a match, I watched, and you guys got to the fifth game, and man, every ball is going to you for side out, and they needed your arm all the time. You guys go back and forth. You get to match point for the other team. They set you, and you hit a great shot, deep five.
Okay.
Misses by this much.
Yes.
Remember that? And the match is over.
Yes.
So, one, what do you do when you're the one that hit that ball that was this far out? And what do you tell young kids who make an error on match point with a good swing? I mean, tell them how that feels, how you handle it, and maybe how your teammates supported you there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it sucks, making an error on match point. But I think also in the sport of volleyball, like almost every point ends on somebody making an error. Either someone's hitting out or somebody doesn't make a dig, or you get you shank a ball, like whatever. But I think just remembering that you'll also probably make more errors if you're super timid with what you're doing. If you half a swing, you're more likely to hit it in the net. You're more likely to whale it. You've got a lot less control. So I think just staying super aggressive, also, obviously being like technically like you're making good choices, but aggressive good choices is always the way to go. You're going to have more errors if you're timid.
Well, that's really good for young kids. Second thing, who do you see somebody do something well out there? You're just a freshman. You're in the league now. You're watching all these opponents. Who do you see out there that you kind of want to steal something from, or they're doing something that you want to do that too? Have you picked out a couple of things from either the opponents that you really like, something that sticks in your mind that you said, yeah, I want to do that too?
I mean, I think, again, Pac-12, I think there's so many good players here and everyone's doing everything so well. And even on my own team, like Brooke will hit a ball and I'm like, I want to be able to do that. Brooke will dig a ball and I'm like, I want to try and do that. Like, so me and Brooke are pepper partners and we do ball control, and if I hit it not so perfect and still she makes this amazing great dive and warm-ups, and I'm like, how are you doing that? Like, I think my defense has gotten already so much better just having her like kind of coach me and be there with me and help me. Like, she'll give me tips, and Brooke's my own little personal side coach. But yeah, again, I think everyone here is like in the conference is incredible, and everyone's doing good things. But again, even on our own team, there's so many things that I want to be able to do, like from people on our own team.
So that's I have one more question, but that's exactly what Logan Tom would always do. She would look at me and say, I want the best pepper partner because I want to get better. And secondly, she said, and I don't want to shag a bunch of balls. I want somebody that's going to dig and somebody that's going to set it back to me.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So the last question that I had just went by me, and it was a good question. I'm sorry.
All right, go back to it. I'm going to ask.
We'll get back to it.
I want to ask one here. All right, I've got two real ones and then a fun one. Yeah. What is your favorite swing? Like, is it one? Do you have one pin that you prefer? Maybe the Bic? Is there something in practice you guys work on?
I think we've been doing really well on like just connecting with our back rows, both the Bic and the D-ball. I think that's been really successful. And again, I think we're connecting and we're meshing really well right now. So honestly, as of right now, probably that one, probably some sort of back row, especially transition. Yeah,
it's always fun. I do play-by-play, so calling the back row swing, especially when the front row thinks that it's going to someone else, is always like a good little curveball to throw.
Yeah.
Now, on less of a fun note, in early October, you kind of went through a team struggle, and that's something that I think is important, especially at that point in the season when you're giving advice, or if you were to give advice to another incoming freshman that goes through 3 straight losses with a ton of attack errors, and obviously you could be in your head about it here and there, what would you either tell yourself again if you were to go through it again in early October, or what would you tell to another player coming in to get through a little bit of a tough stretch?
Yeah, I think honestly, again, just leaning into your teammates. I know I've said that before, but we are such a close group of girls. Like, I've never had like experiencing, like every single one of the girls on our team is absolutely incredible. They're my best friends, and just being able to lean into them, like, again, that they see that I'm struggling, I'm able to lean into them, to have them help me out. And also because we are such a solid team and like the depth, if I am struggling, then somebody else can help me out. Like if I'm not scoring, okay, somebody else can score. I just need to do whatever my job is. If I can do that solid and everyone does that solidly, then we're going to be a really good team.
Perfect. Unity and chemistry. And then leaning on a teammate, though, is there conversations amongst the freshmen about trying to get on Brooke's TikTok? Because obviously Oregon sports TikTok, from Haley Cruz and then over to Brooke Nonaviller, it's high praise to make it onto that. Is that a conversation ever that you want to get on?
I mean, usually Brooke comes to us, she's like, guys, I have this idea. I think this will be a really funny TikTok. We're going to make it. And we're like, okay, I believe whatever Brooke says. If Brooke wants to do it, I am right along with her.
Okay. And then is there any fun Coach Ulmer tie-ins to that, whether it be him wanting you to stop, either fooling around with this or anything that he's been a part of for fun stories?
He definitely likes to have his fun. He just is, I don't even know. That guy is just insane. Like, we have this card game that we play that we bring on every single trip, and it's like, technically it's like cooperative, but it always turns into competitive, and he always likes to like make fun of me and say that I'm doing it wrong, and I'm just like, it's fine, but he just, I don't even know, I can't even with him. It's okay. So he's good at coaching volleyball. He's fine.
So let me ask you my question, because it had to do with setters. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had at least 2 different setters this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
So how does that, setters like to be comfortable, but when they have to compete for the position, every set counts, and it makes it even that tougher. And it seems now you're with a different setter than what you started with, if I've got this right. So how has that been? Does that change the team chemistry, or does it change the way you hit the ball, or what does it change when you switch that position? Because the setter position is like point guard in basketball, quarterback in football.
Yeah.
They handle the ball at least once every time it comes over the net.
Yeah. I think we're lucky that we have such good depth within our setter position. Both Elise and Hannah are, incredible. So either of them are on the court, we know it's going to be a good ball. So from a hitting perspective, it doesn't necessarily change. Like I said, they're both good enough. They're putting the ball in the same place every time. It's just, obviously up to us to score. But they're both really good leaders on and off the court, and, they're really good people too.
That is a Logan Tom interview if I ever saw one.
There we go. Great.
You're
great, Chad, and absolutely a pleasure. You've got a huge weekend against a pair of top 30 teams this weekend. So good luck, Mimi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Mimi.
That'll wrap things up from our first episode here in November. For Mimi and Mick, I'm Daniel Gilman. This is 6 Rotation.